Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today's lesson is going to be continuing our study of structure. I mentioned in our last lesson that we would begin sentences. I referred to them as statements, but actually we have several types of sentences. Before we get to that, let's just define sentence for what it is. A sentence in English always begins with a capital letter. It will also end with the appropriate punctuation. Now, the sentence is traditionally defined as a group of words that expresses a complete idea, including a subject and a verb. Now, a formula for a simple sentence would be constructed like this. Subject plus auxiliary verb, if necessary, plus main verb plus predicate. Now, predicate also includes our verbs, but in this case, I'm separating it just for objective content. Now, let's get to those types of sentence structures. Now, first, we have declarative. If you can remember, I was talking about statements. Now, declarative is a statement, a subject plus at least one verb. So, a declarative sentence is the simplest type of form. Now, its purpose is to give information and it's punctuated with a period. Now, let's look at an example. But keep in mind, I want you to remember those auxiliary verbs because you need to express yourself as we go along. An example of a declarative sentence is, today I would like to go to the supermarket. Next, we have imperative sentences. Now, imperative sentences use one verb to state a simple fact or to give an instruction. They can be friendly, but normally they're a little bit more commanding. For example, be quiet. That's not a complete sentence, but it is more of an instruction. Next, we have exclamatory sentences. And just like they sound, they're similar to declarative sentences, but with an exclamation point at the end. Now, they're usually easily recognized because we're trying to express that strong emotion that aligns with the exclamation point. For example, what amazing progress that you've made so far. Now, the fourth type is the interrogative sentence. And guess what? We've already learned this. These are questions. So, don't forget the structure of a question. Now, let's review the type of sentence structures. These are slightly different. I'm going to go over a lot of new vocabulary, but just hang in there with me. We'll explain one thing at a time. First, we have the simple sentence, as I said before. Now, this is a sentence with at least a subject and verb. Next, we have the compound sentence. Now, this is two or more simple sentences which are joined by a conjunction. For example, and, but, or. Third, we have complex sentences. This would be a sentence that contains an independent clause or main clause and at least one dependent clause. And last, we have the compound complex, which is a sentence with two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. Now, that's a lot of new information, and over our next lessons, we will discuss what clauses are and how to use them. Another important thing to remember is that sentences contain clauses. They are fundamental. But for now, I would like to just stick with that easy form. Subject plus predicate. Now, first let's look at subjects. A subject is anything or any person that the sentence is about. Now, usually it will be the first part of a sentence, almost 100% of the time. We always need a subject in English for a sentence to be complete. Now, the subject will be a noun, phrase, which is a noun and words such as adjectives or articles, which is followed by a verb. So we have gone over a lot of rules when it comes to verbs, just so that we can get to this point. But let's utilize those rules when we look at the predicate. Now, the predicate is the remainder of the sentence which tells us what the subject does or did. For example, it will always include a verb and the words which come after a verb, which I call objective content for now. The sentence will always have ending punctuation as well. This can be a period, a question mark, an exclamation point, and a sentence contains or implies a predicate or a subject. So in the next series, as I said, we will talk more about clauses, but also punctuation and how to use it and where to use it. But moving on, what's more important for us right now in structure is subject and verb agreement. Now, the definition of subject-verb agreement in English is the requirement that a subject and verb must match in person and in number. Now, what does that mean? Subjects and verbs should always have the appropriate agreement, whether singular or plural. And sometimes this can be a little confusing. It's acceptable to match a singular subject with a plural verb and vice versa, but only this. Let's have a look at some examples. My plays. My plays games. My cats play. My cats play games. So, for regular nouns, we will look at the main rule, which is adding s or es when added to a noun to make the noun plural. Now, a noun plus s is added to the simple present verb when the subject is a singular noun. For example, languages are important. Now remember that this is also added to the third person singular noun. She, he, or it. So, she tries, he tries, it tries. Now, if you notice, the pronunciation of the S and Z changed as I was speaking. That's because we have certain rules. Just like in our previous lessons, when we discussed the ED verbs, we also need to discuss pronunciation of S or ES nouns and verbs. So let's have a closer look at those rules. Let's have a closer look at the pronunciation of S and ES verbs. First, we'll look at the S sound. Now, this is used with voiceless sounds. For example, racks, grapes, hats. Next, let's look at the Z sound. This is used after voice sounds. For example, beds, vibes, these. And then we'll look at the schwa E sound. This will produce two syllables. For example, dishes, catches, kisses, mixes, edges. Let's also take a look at the spelling of S and ES verbs. First, if you add a final S, You use this with most nouns and verbs. For example, sing, sings. Song, songs. When we add the ES, it's for words that specifically end in SH, CH, S, Z, and X. For example, class, classes. Search, searches. Miss, misses. Fizz, vizzes. And box, boxes. We also have an exception for words ending in Y. If Y is preceded by a vowel, only add an S. For example, toy becomes toys. Now, if Y is preceded by a consonant, we need to change the Y to I and add ES. For example, cry becomes cries. So make sure to keep practicing because it's very important to your development. Great. So that was a lot of information. I'm adding a lot of new things for you to study. I'm going to have some accompanying lessons to guide you along the way, as well as some quizzes and exercises, because you may feel a little overwhelmed with all of the new vocabulary. So every day I'm going to publish something new about structure, and we will get to that point where you can have conversation, where you are asking questions in the correct format and responding or beginning a sentence. Now, please subscribe and share with your friends. I really appreciate all of your support, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.